everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
Doing a good job for your clients over the long run is being very transparent and making sure that we're in it together. I mean, we don't win as a UI unless our clients do. Like and that's very important to us. That's how we work with our clients. And so if as I mentioned earlier, people are saying, let's take a breath together, right? And what we're saying to people, as I mentioned before, is we have to make sure we get this right across the entire organization. So I think if you're doing those things and you're valuing your relationships and you're making sure that you're true to that core principle of how you operate, we'll manage through it together, right? If you're out there trying to flog product, that could be scary, right? For both client and consultant. It's not what we do. We want to make sure that we're there together, up and down in the cycle.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Jay Persaud, EY Global Emerging Technology Ecosystem Leader. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be with you.
So first, why don't you tell us about the emerging technology ecosystem and what you're specifically overseeing?
Okay, so the EY Global Emerging Technology Ecosystem is a group that we put together over the past year, and we're very focused on identifying, curating, and building strong relationships with emerging tech companies, startups, scale-ups, small caps, if you like. Traditionally, the firm has done a really good job in working with the big tech companies. That's sort of very natural and easy to do. And we've done a spotty job traditionally in relating with the smaller ones. So this is our way of making sure we standardize how we deal with these companies. It's very important that we have those kinds of relationships because, as you know, Scott, a big part of innovation lives in this environment. These startups and scale-ups are incredibly capable companies. They understand what's happening in the market. We need that kind of interaction and inclusion in our service delivery because clients are demanding it. So that's the job. We work with teams across the world. I would say there may be 15 countries that are areas of focus, United States obviously being an important one. But it's going very well, building great relationships and seeing great value for our clients in those relationships.
So I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So according to PitchBook, this was as of last year, I think we had over 3,200 startups that had failed, and they managed to collectively raise some $27 billion. And of course, we know that there's probably easily $500 billion that's been lost over the last couple of years or so. Now, with that said, that's challenging both for the VC ecosystem, but also challenging for the startups. But it also puts a bit of a danger for the clients that you guys are bringing some of these startups to, given the fact that how do you know that these startups are going to be around and that even if they are exciting, like in the area of Gen AI, when the asset bubble bursts, who's going to be left holding the bag?
It's a great question. And we do think about that. So we go through a vetting process when I mentioned curation. And one of the lenses we use is that the company needs to have a product that works, that it solves a client problem. So we can't be too early. So it has to have a certain degree of maturity. And then we'll bring them in to a client situation. We'll test it to see if it works. If it works, then we go and try to do more of it. If it doesn't work, then we wait and maybe try again later. So far, knock on wood, we haven't really had any blow-ups. What happens in our industry, Scott, is we're an audit firm, as you know. So if we audit a company or a group of companies, it's very hard. What we cannot do consulting with those companies. Those are the rules. And that is probably the thing that, causes us change more than any other. Because what could happen sometimes is that one of these companies end up becoming part of an audit complex, in which case we will have to unwind it. But generally speaking, in the past year, we haven't had to deal with much of this because we're very careful on the front end that there's a good, strong product that can solve a problem before we actually get into the process of including them in the solution.
So you bring up an excellent point, which is in your industry for the last several years, there's been both ambitions to either separate out, bifurcate the consulting from the audit, or in some cases try to forge both. But it's been challenging to say the least. Where is EY with this, and how do you guys balance these things and making sure there's no conflict of interest?
Yeah, another great question. It is extremely important for all of the accounting firms, legacy accounting firms, ourselves included, that we stay on the right side of regulation. Independence is very important. Conflicts of interest have to be avoided. We have lots of policies and procedures to manage that. That said, if you look at our footprint of audits, we audit the majority of the large technology firms, and that happened decades ago. And we still keep those audits because audits are important to us. That said, again, we cannot consult with them, so it creates a narrower playing field for us. And you might have seen that we attempted to resolve that by doing a separation, which was unsuccessful this past time. But the drivers are still there, right? So to avoid conflicts of interest, which we must do. Now, our focus on the emerging tech ecosystem becomes even more important for us. Because one thing I've learned over the years is that all big companies start small. So by relating and working with them, we improve our chances of having the kind of technology relationships that we need to do the best job that we can for our clients.
So I think it does a couple of things. One is, again, having pretty much grown up in Silicon Valley most of my life, is that a lot of, especially auditing companies, but also consulting companies, have nurtured and have worked with these burgeoning, emerging startups. And that's kind of been the nature of Silicon Valley for almost 50 plus years. Now, with that said, are you also taking some of these startups and bringing them to your larger clients, almost like what we're seeing from a partner marketing or reseller type of a model that we're seeing more and more, even with the big tech companies, where they're trimming down their own in-house sales and they're leveraging more of their partner ecosystem, who typically end up being private or small caps?
That's frankly one of the bigger benefits that we bring to the equation. Like if Scott, if you're the emerging tech company, you want to get your product to market as quickly as possible. We have hundreds of thousands of clients, lots of big ones. That's what we bring. That's the trade. We want your innovation. You get access to our network, and you get to learn pretty quickly whether it's going to be successful, in one of these client situations. To your point on what the firms have done in the past, nurturing these relationships. Traditionally, we've nurtured them to try to audit everybody, right? Which is what you would have seen in Silicon Valley. EY has been particularly successful at that. But we want to keep a balance. Of course, we want to maintain our audit standing, but we also want to make sure that for our consulting businesses, we can access those companies that we think we need for our client service. And it's one or the other, right? You can't do both. So again, like I mentioned earlier, the trade for the emerging technology companies as access is basically de-risking your investment, de-risking your product. You're getting out to market faster, which is what we would provide. Then pretty quickly if it works or not.
And then what's in it for you guys? Is there a revenue share? Is there equity?
Yeah, we do that. I mean, so we don't take a financial interest. We're regulated. We don't do that. But what's in it for us is access to the innovation. I can tell you this: every client that I talk to, obviously they all work with the large tech companies, but they're also very interested in what's going on in the emerging tech world. Very, very innovative companies, and they want to see that included in the service pack that we would provide. So the benefit that we get is the innovation that comes from these smaller companies.
So with that, let's talk about some of those emerging technology because there's a lot. I mean, we could talk about nuclear fusion, hydrogen to Gen AI, but again, I just kind of tend to frown upon Gen AI just because it's such a small sliver of the artificial intelligence. But talk to us about what are the areas of emerging technologies that you guys are looking at?
Sure. So Gen AI, I mean, it's taking up all the oxygen, right, in the room. So that's that. I'll just park that for a minute, right? Um, the really the large language models, the four big players, if you like, are all there. They're doing what they're doing, and they're doing well. There are a number of smaller ones, as you know, Scott, that are coming up now, and they're very focused on solving specific problems, vertical AI, if you like. So we're dealing with a lot of those. And of course, whatever it is you buy as a client, the most important thing, or one of the most important things that you're going to have to make sure you have, is the data, right? That is cleaned, is prepared, is transparent, is governed, it's safe. And so all of the data management work, all of the security work, cybersecurity, all of that sort of thing, we do all of that in terms of our services to our clients. There are many startups that are very focused on that as well, and we want to make sure we have those relationships also. So there's a lot that goes into getting Gen AI to work, as you know. And then all of the enablers, as we refer to them, we're very focused on every one of them also.
So again, I think McKinsey had laid out even a few years ago, but certainly they mentioned that this is a year of really scaling AI. But I wonder if there isn't this concern among your clients, and I think we're just starting to see some of the surveys come out where it's specifically around Gen AI that perhaps maybe it's just too costly, or that in the next year or two, the clients are going to be experimenting, are going to find that it's very disappointing in terms of the abilities, capabilities, and the ability to actually have any kind of impact on KPIs and business outcomes. And when the Gen AI bubble does pop and the clients are holding the cost centers, how would that look upon EY as well as your partners?
Yeah. Again, another insightful question, Scott. So that's starting right now. I think if we had with us today the senior executive teams of some of the larger companies, they've all said, let's take a breath, right? So they are stepping back, to your point, and they're saying, what should we be doing? Let's slow down. Let's try and figure out exactly what we're going to do. Where can we have the greatest impact? And what do we actually need to do in this company to drive the kind of change that Gen AI is selling, right? Because if it works the way it's been marketed, organizations will change completely. You're going to have, a lot less people doing certain things and a lot more people doing other things, right? You have to kind of rewrite the entire procedural basis for the organization. You have to do a whole bunch of different things. So I think people are realizing all of those things need to occur right now. And so, if you remember last year when it was rushing out, we have to get into the technology because if we don't, we're going to lose. So, and people bought it, right? But now EY is being very careful, for example, because we use a lot of AI to make sure that not only do we purchase what we need to embed it into our organization. We need to understand how the organization needs to change. We need to understand how our service delivery models need to change. And I don't think it's overnight. I think it takes time. And I think it takes a lot of collaboration to make sure that we get it right. Remember, we're not even talking about the safety and security part of this, which is a whole other conversation, but just the functionality of it within the organization to make sure that you can transition from where you are today. It's maybe the biggest change exercise we would have had in the last several decades, if you think about it, right? So you got to manage from where you are today to where you're going to be, because you're still going to have thousands of people working for you in one of these big companies.
So as I'm listening, I'm just thinking from an EY perspective, it's challenging because really the bigger opportunities on the consulting side, but that's something that you guys can pursue in conjunction with auditing. So how do you ensure that you can capture this potential profit center, especially given the fact that consulting overall is starting to shrink just because of macroeconomics, still making sure that there's clear wall separation?
Yeah. I mean, consulting's cyclical, right? We're going through the trough right now. There's so much technology purchased during COVID, and then with Gen AI that people are taking a breath, like I mentioned. The key to our business, Scott, is relationships. It's trust, right? Is doing a good job for your clients over the long run. Is being very transparent and making sure that we're in it together. I mean, we don't win as a UI unless our clients do. Like and that's very important to us. That's how we work with our clients. And so, if as I mentioned earlier, people are saying, let's take a breath together, right? And what we're saying to people, as I mentioned before, is we have to make sure we get this right across the entire organization. So I think if you're doing those things and you're valuing your relationships and you're making sure that you're true to that core principle of how you operate, we'll manage through it together, right? If you're out there trying to flog product, that could be scary, right? For both client and consultant. It's not what we do. We want to make sure that we're there together, up and down in the cycle.
And I think it's especially important for an auditing company because if this change management, this organizational redesign or transformation happens haphazardly, those are breakdown in governance. Those are breakdown in controls, data, governance, systems, processes, people. That can come back and bite everybody. So to your point, talk to us about the different buckets of people, the tools, the data, as well as even the governance aspects of how these organizations are thinking through these big transformational exponential technologies.
Yeah. So maybe a good way of talking about this, let's talk about how we think about it ourselves, right? A little bit. So what we did last year, and then I'll extend it out to a couple of other examples. What we did last year is that, everything started, right? I guess over a year now. And we put together an AI program for EY, right? And so we said, look, this is going to have tremendous impact on our client service. So we said, here's a pillar. How do we transform the way we serve our clients, transform our clients, if you like, our client service? And then we said, this is going to have a tremendous impact on EY, right? And how we run ourselves. And we had a team and said, how do we manage that, transforming ourselves? And then it's very important. You've seen our purpose, building a better working world. It's important for us to do the right things, given what people expect of the brand and of our firm. And then we developed a term called transforming the world, right? What can we do as good corporate citizens to help to advance the social and the economic and the diversity side of AI? So that's how we set it up. And we're very purposeful in that we included people from every part of the organization. And that we made sure that every one of the rules that were being promulgated out there, the EU AI Act, for example, and others, that we had a good understanding of what it meant so that we can make sure we applied it to ourselves. We looked at our own technology, we made sure we very carefully evaluated what impact it would have on ourselves. Then we looked at our client service and we talked with our clients. We tried to understand what was important for them in how we addressed our methods and our tools and that kind of thing. I guess what I'm saying, broadly speaking, is that we included a whole bunch of different people to get their perspectives on what we should do. And it takes time. It takes time and then we came up with a whole lot of procedures and we're moving probably slower than some people would like, right? But it's a big place. And when you're listening to people, you're generally going to go a little bit slower. And that's what we're doing. So I don't think it's hurt us at all, right? In terms of, going slower than what some would have liked. I actually think it's helped us a lot because we're bringing people along on the journey of change. So that's how we're thinking about it. And we want to infuse that kind of thinking in our people when we're relating to our clients, which is what we're doing. And so the advice, the sort of human interaction like you and I are having right now, right? That doesn't change. It doesn't go away. And I think it's really, really important that becomes a prevalent part of the discussion when you're talking about something that can sound awfully scary to people, right? The way it's being sold as the kind of change that it's going to bring. So it's a bit of a rambling response to your question, but what I'm saying is that, you've got to do it together. You've got to keep people motivated, engaged, and you have to have them feel a certain level of security that we're going to get through this together and that no one's going to get left behind.
So again, from an EY perspective, you guys bring a very interesting perspective that maybe other consultancy, pure consultancies would not, which is you're not just simply bringing these emerging tech startups, best in breed, maybe even top within their quadrant, let's say, but you're also bringing them not just for their capabilities and possible use cases for your clients, but you're looking at it from the perspective, how would that potentially be utilized and get integrated? And where are checkpoints from an auditing so that as those things are getting considered and eventually rolled out, you're also thinking through how do we actually audit these things as well? Can you talk to us about that framework, that mindset of how do you bolt on to some of these emerging technologies?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've seen this, Scott. In our dialogue on AI in particular, we talk about something called the confidence index. It may be out there in the press. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think that's a good way of addressing your question. So the confidence index, what we've done with that, we've said, look, people are going to implement these technologies, this Gen AI in particular, and it's new, we're learning about it, etc. But how do we get adoption? How do we get people actually, feeling comfortable about it? They should have some degree of confidence in it. So what we do is that we go through a process of measuring and then evaluating and then implementing changes as required. People, process, and technology, right? And then we try to give you a score between 1 and 10, let's say, right? That'll give you a good appreciation for where you are. How confident are you that it's giving you the results that you thought it would? That's a key part of our approach in this, is to make sure that the all sides of the coins are being considered. So are we uniquely positioned to do that? I would say yes. Firms like ours are, because of our pedigree of where we come from. We do have a perspective, a lens that we use of trust. And we want to make sure that that is an integral part of how we approach the implementation of these technologies, to your point.
Now, I think for some time, the nature of auditing firms have had to undergo change themselves, dramatic change, including the kinds of talent and skills that's necessary. So when we think about Gen AI, again, it's just a one sliver of many types of capabilities that are out there from a deep learning and machine learning, is that it's looking through everything from the design aspects, from the data curation, the data massaging, let's say, the different levels of the neuron networks, and then the potential, if you're looking at different models and reconciling across the different models to get some certain types of weights, and then effectively the results and being able to have assurance throughout each of those stages, and to your point, have confidence scores that what you're getting is in fact unbiased, reasonable, and trustworthy. How is that changing your organization, and how ready do you feel like your organization is to support this endeavor as you guys are looking to go through some pretty interesting transformational time for Fortune 500 and really, companies below?
So we're working furiously at it. It is going to change everything. You mentioned audit, think tax, right? Anything that's rules-based, where you have models that can ingest all the rules and then you can train it on specific engagements, is going to change everything you do, right? So we are working very hard on that right now. We're making great progress. We've launched, we're calling it EYQ. So it's the Microsoft OpenAI, and we've trained it on our data, and that's for all of our employees. It was launched several months ago, and that is being used across all of our services. And we're taking everything that we do, and then we're running it, training the model on how to do it with Gen AI driving. It's going well. Is it all ready for prime time? No, because we're very careful. You have to make sure that you have confidence in what you're getting out of these tools when you use them. But I guess my short response to your point is, it will change dramatically change everything we do in the consulting business, the tax business, and the audit business. There's no doubt about it. And you have to do it carefully. You have to do it together, and you have to do it with confidence. So while it may not be tomorrow, Scott, I think in a 2-3 years time, you're going to see dramatic changes to how we effectuate our services.
Now, because you specifically are overseeing the global emerging tech ecosystem, is that if out of anybody really, you should have clear visibility in terms of new techniques, approaches that are coming out, for example, from MIT and others, where it's not so taxing in terms of whether it's computational power or the need for billions and trillions and gazillions of parameters, let's say. You could use a lot smaller data sets. You could actually get outputs in single iteration versus multiple series of iterations. Again, we're seeing these white papers and publications come out almost on a weekly basis. What are your thoughts in terms of more efficient approaches and methods, as well as those that are not just pushing out pure raw compute capabilities like typical diffusion-based Gen AI?
So I mentioned earlier people saying stepping back and taking a breath. I think the breath they're taking is contemplating what you just said, right? The old saying, do you need a sledgehammer to kill a fly? You don't, right? And so we're seeing a lot more of that. People are saying, do we really need all of this to solve this particular use case? So once you figured out strategically what you're going to do, what the impact will be on your organization, and you prioritize where you believe Gen AI will have the greatest impact, you don't have to use the big, huge model the way you've described that can write you a beautiful poem and fix your finance problem at the same time. You don't, right? You can get something that's smaller, that's more fit for purpose, and apply it. And I believe, Scott, that we'll be seeing more and more of that. Certainly that's the impressions I'm getting right now from the conversations we're having, and we're developing relationships with those companies. I mean, those, the customer service is what, the number 2 use case that you would know this better than me, right? There are a number of companies that are in that right now, and they're not running giant models. They're running things that are needed for that particular purpose, finance, you name it, accounting. Mm-hmm. So we'll see, I don't know how many, tens, hundreds, thousands of companies that come up with very, very specific approaches to solve problems. And I think the job of companies with their employees and consultants and others is, again, figuring out the fabric and then stitching it all together.
Yep.
To come up with a more efficient answer.
So let's look forward maybe 10, maybe even 25 years out. Again, there's a study that came out, I think, within the last week that started to ask managers, and managers, I think they're referring to not just middle, but upper managers. And 1 out of 2 basically indicate in these surveys that they're looking to replace or displace humans with different forms of AI. Now, we don't like to talk about this, and I know from a marketing perspective, tech companies have gone out of their way to spend lots of money to coin it as co-innovation, cobots, co-pilot, whatever it is. But the reality is, while historically innovation has been just fine and we've adapted, the nature of exponential technologies and the combination, the convergence, and the pace at which it's happening is so rapid, our ability as humans to adapt is becoming slower relative to the quickened pace of innovation. And the fact that not only is there a layoff because of profitability and earnings reports ambitions, but ultimately the ambition is to replace people. Where I'm coming with this is less of a social political angle, but specifically coming back to auditing is, you mentioned people, process, tools, and of course, underlying all of this is data. In the next 20, 25 years, when you have less people and you're auditing effectively more the agents, robots, and collection of AI systems, how does that change the nature of auditing?
It's a great question. I think the purpose of the audit, the reason why it exists, is consistent, right? It's a vehicle for trust. I think how companies operate operate, how they use technologies, the impact of Gen AI as an example, will change how those businesses are done. The way we do an audit, Scott, if you look at the last 25 years, it's night and day. It's very different. There's a ton of technology in auditing right now. I started over 30 years ago. It looked a lot different than it does today. That will continue to evolve. I would agree with you that all of those things that are automatable will be automated. And there'll be fewer people doing the sorts of things that we do today because the tools are there. There is no doubt about that. What I also believe, and maybe it's because we're eternal optimists, is that there won't be fewer people working. I think they'll be doing other things. I think organizations like ours will figure out other ways to keep people employed doing different things for our clients. Whether it's auditing or something related to auditing is most likely what will happen. If you want to broaden the question a little bit and ask what happens to society if all of the rote things that people do today are being done by robots or with AI, we could solve climate change, right? I mean, we could do a whole bunch of other things today that the resources are not focused on. So I'm optimistic in that sense, socially, what it could mean. Technically, in our business, particular to audit and tax, let's just say that you asked about, there will be fewer people doing the things that are done today. But we will be doing other things to make sure that we are helpful to our clients because their needs 25 years from now will be different than they are today. By the simple adoption, I believe, of many of these technologies. So, important, and maybe sort of going back to the start of this conversation a little bit, I think it's really, really important that relationships are nurtured and that we find ways of supporting each other, knowing that this change that we're going to go through is probably one of the bigger ones that we've seen in our lifetime.
Again, I think from a vantage point, both looking hindsight that past 30 years that you referenced, but also looking forward that 20, 30 years is very exciting. And the last question that I would ask is, there's been reduced trust for auditors, whether it's Theranos, whether it's FTX. There's just so many examples. And again, oftentimes it's not the auditors themselves because they are misused, let's say, by these malfeasant founders, let's say. But can you talk to the audience about those that are apprehensive and that, if anything, the role of auditing is even more precarious with some of these transformational changes?
Yeah, so there's something in the auditing profession that was referred to several decades ago called the expectation gap. And what that refers to is what the public expects from you and what you actually do. And it happens because there isn't a standard understanding of what auditing actually is, right? And the cases you mentioned and the others where management, is hell-bent on deceiving any kind of oversight, including auditors, they will succeed. And so one of the basic concepts of audit is that you have to rely on representations of management. That said, though, Scott, you also have to have a good sense of professional skepticism, right, to make sure that what they're telling you hangs together and is consistent. I think all of those issues will continue forward as long as humans exist, right? And I hope we exist for a couple more million years. And technologies, however, have the ability to check better than humans do, right? And I think the appropriate use of these technologies in how we do business and how we oversee business will actually help to increase trust. And I think we have to have some confidence that we're going to be able to use that effectively. So I'm very optimistic, right? That maybe it feels like we're at a trough in trust right now in the world. Like if you just listen to the media, I mean, all this fighting and screaming that you hear all the time doesn't feel good. It feels bad. But I believe that better times will come if we use them effectively.
All right. So on that note, I have been joined by Jay Persaud, EY Global Emerging Technology Ecosystem Leader. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Scott. I enjoyed it.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.